Close your eyes and listen to the silence. There is a moment between the falling of the old and the rising of the new. This is that moment. You have walked through darkness, not because you chose it, but because the path demanded it. And though your legs were trembling, still you walked. Though your heart was breaking, still you breathed. Though the world seemed still, uncaring and cold, still you endured. This was not weakness. This was not punishment. This was fire. The hardest time was the fire that does not destroy but reveals. And now the fire has passed, and you are still here. This is not a small thing. Listen, God said, you've passed the hardest time. What does this mean? It means the weight you carried has done its work. The storms you braved have shaped your spirit. The wounds you suffered have taught you to bleed without breaking. You are not who you were before. Everything changes now, not because the world suddenly becomes kind, but because now you are ready. You have earned the right to rise. You have paid the price of transformation. The gates that were once locked are now open, not by luck, not by chance, but by discipline, humility, and inner stillness. Do not rush forward. Stand still, feel the ground beneath you. Feel the breath in your chest. There is no need to prove anything anymore. There is only the task of walking with clarity. What lies ahead is not easier, but it is lighter, because now you walk with awareness. Now your burden is purpose. So take this moment and honor yourself, not with pride, but with peace. The war is over. You are not broken. You are reborn, and from this point forward, walk like the storm has passed. Speak like the silence has returned. Live like the dawn has come, because it has. God said, you've passed the hardest time. So everything changes now. There are seasons in life where the world turns silent, not peaceful, silent, where joy becomes distant, and the hours crawl like shadows across the floor. These are not the times we celebrate. These are the winters of the soul, the long nights, the unseen battles fought behind quiet faces. And yet, it is in these hidden places of pain, of challenge, and of quiet perseverance that the self is forged anew. It is not in comfort, nor in success, that transformation finds its root, but in hardship, in the heat of suffering patiently endured. When a person walks through hardship, they are not simply surviving. They are being shaped. Like metal in a flame, the structure of who they are begins to shift. The illusions fall away, the illusions of control, of permanence, of who they thought they had to be. What remains is the raw material of truth. In these moments when there is nothing left to cling to, a new kind of clarity is born. Not the clarity that comes from books or advice or the opinions of others, but the clarity that rises only from within, from sitting face with despair, with failure, with loss, and choosing still to breathe, to walk, to rise. The world tends to glorify strength that is loud, aggressive, dominating, but true endurance is silent. It does not shout. It does not demand applause. It suffers in stillness. It keeps moving without promise of reward. And yet it is this quiet, unshakable kind of strength that changes people in the most profound ways, because it requires not the conquering of others, but the conquering of the self. The discipline to stay centered when everything falls apart, the willingness to keep faith when the outcome is unknown, the courage to trust the process even while it hurts. Most people fear pain. Naturally, they avoid it. They numb it, they fight it. But pain, when allowed to teach rather than destroy, becomes a doorway. It opens parts of ourselves we would never have touched otherwise. In hardship, we learn patience, not the kind that waits, but the kind that bears. We learn humility, not weakness, but the honest awareness of how little we control. We learn presence, not as a technique, but as a survival instinct, because the future becomes too uncertain to hold on to. We learn compassion, not only for others, but for ourselves, for the fractured, fragile beings we are under the surface of all appearances. There is a kind of wisdom that can only be born through suffering. not because suffering is noble or desirable, but because it strips away everything else. In the absence of distraction, of comfort, of ease, we begin to see what matters. We begin to remember who we are when nothing is left to perform. And that is where the deepest change begins, not in becoming someone else, but in returning to the self we buried beneath all the noise. Think of the tree in winter. It does not fight the cold. It does not rage against the falling leaves. It stands still, it endures, and in that stillness, beneath the surface, the roots deepen. The strength is not visible, but it is real, and when the spring returns, the bloom is not sudden. It is the result of what was growing quietly in the dark. So too is it with the human soul. Our deepest transformations are not loud or immediate. They happen slowly, invisibly, under pressure. They are the result of our choice to keep standing when we could have fallen, to keep breathing when we wanted to stop, to keep loving when we felt empty. Endurance is not giving up. It is giving in to the process of growth, to the reality of what is, to the flow of life as it unfolds. It is not weakness. It is strength surrendered to time. The hardest part of hardship is not the pain. It is the uncertainty. Not knowing how long it will last, not knowing if it will end, not knowing what will be left on the other side. But this is precisely where the transformation happens, because in that space of unknowing, we are forced to lean into trust. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in ourselves. Trust that we are being prepared for something we cannot yet see. Trust that the pain is not meaningless. Trust that we will not emerge the same, but better, not because the world changes, but because we do. And once you have endured something truly difficult, once you have been stripped bare and learned to keep going anyway, your perception shifts, you become quieter, you speak less, but your words carry weight. You judge less because you have seen your own weaknesses and understand others carry hidden battles too. You cling less because you know how easily things can fall away. You move through the world not with fear, but with steadiness. Not with pride, but with presence. You become a person others turn to not because you have all the answers, but because you've walked through the fire and learned how to stay calm within it. This is transformation. Not the outward change that others admire, but the inward realignment that only you can feel. You become more yourself, not less. You shed the expectations, the comparisons, the noise. You no longer need to prove your worth, because you've already seen your strength in silence. You've already faced your emptiness and discovered it was full of life waiting to be born. You've already endured what once seemed unendurable, and now you know you can endure again if needed. Does this mean we seek hardship? No, life will bring enough. But when it comes, we do not run. We listen, we soften, we accept, we endure. And in that endurance, we discover the power that was always within us waiting for the fire to call it forth. To endure is to bow, not in defeat, but in reverence, to say, I do not understand this pain, but I honor what it is here to teach me. I do not see the path ahead, but I trust the steps I am taking. I do not know how long this will last, but I will remain faithful to the process. Many people spend their lives running from hardship, fearing it as failure, but those who have endured long suffering, deep pain, and difficult roads, they carry a different kind of light. It is not blinding. It is not boastful. It is gentle, steady, and unshakable, because it has been tested, and what has been tested becomes real. In the end, transformation is not about becoming someone greater. It is about becoming someone truer. And endurance is the sacred passage to that truth. It is a quiet fire. It refines, it humbles, it awakens. It asks everything from you and gives you something you could never buy or earn: wisdom, depth, presence, stillness. When you look back at the hardest times in your life, you may not remember every detail, but you will remember how they changed you. You will remember who you became. You will remember that you stood when you thought you would fall. And that is what stays, that is what defines you. So when you are in the fire, do not rush to escape. Be present with the burning. Know that this moment, painful as it is making you. It is shaping something eternal in you. Something that will not crack when life shakes again. Something that will not fade when applause ends. Something that will not bend to fear or shame or doubt. You are not being punished. You are being prepared for deeper peace, for greater compassion, for truer strength. And one day, when the storm clears, you will not even need to speak of what you've been through. People will see it in your eyes, in your presence, in your silence, and they will know this is someone who has endured, and they have been transformed. There is a tendency in human life to wait for the right time, to wait for circumstances to improve, to wait for the world to shift so that we may finally move forward. We postpone joy, delay purpose, and suspend transformation, all because we are watching the world outside of us, measuring whether or not it is favorable. We look to the weather of the external, the job offer, the relationship, the money, the timing, the praise, and in doing so, we become passive witnesses to our own lives, believing change must come from what surrounds us, not from what stirs within us. But the truth, quiet and unwavering, is this: the new phase you long for does not begin when life outside says it's ready. It begins when you are. There is an internal timing far more sacred than the calendar of the world. It is not dictated by trends, not ruled by pressure, not subject to comparison. It moves with the rhythm of your soul, not the rhythm of society. And when it speaks softly, without spectacle. It says, now, begin now, not because the road is smooth, but because you are steady enough to walk it. Not because the path is open, but because you are strong enough to break through. Not because everything is in place, but because you no longer need everything to be. It is one of life's great misunderstandings that change happens from the outside in. People wait for peace to come before they become peaceful. They wait for love to arrive before they become loving. They wait for success to be handed to them before they believe they are worthy of it. But in truth, the change begins first as a quiet decision within the heart. It begins with a shift so subtle, the world may not even notice, yet it is as real as the first breath after drowning. It is the moment you stop waiting, the moment you stop blaming, the moment you stop giving away your power to events, people, or time. The world may not change when you do. That is not the point. You do not change so that the world can reward you. You change so that you are no longer defined by it. When you are ready within, the world loses its power to delay you. What once held you back becomes irrelevant. The opinions of others no longer anchor your self-worth. The fears that once kept you small lose their grip. The delays that once frustrated you become part of the rhythm. You no longer need permission to begin. You only need presence. There will always be outer noise, doubts, critics, confusion, resistance. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be reasons to hesitate. But once you are aligned within truly aligned, those things become background music. They are no longer obstacles, just passing weather. You see them, acknowledge them, and keep moving, because something inside you has awakened, something quiet but immovable, a conviction that no longer depends on evidence. You do not need clarity about every step. You need commitment to the next one. You do not need perfect confidence. You need courage, enough to begin despite the uncertainty. And when you do, you discover something extraordinary. Movement itself gives rise to more clarity. Action refines purpose. Discipline gives birth to inspiration. And the moment you shift within, even slightly, the landscape outside begins to respond. Not always immediately, not always obviously, but undeniably. Life begins to bend around your inner state. People wait for signs, but sometimes you are the sign. The decision you make today, the line you draw in silence, the vow you make to yourself when no one is watching. That is the turning point. And it cannot be delayed by circumstance because it was never dependent on it. This kind of readiness is not about being perfect. It is about being available, available to truth, available to growth, available to discomfort, to stretch, to beginning even when you are afraid, available to trusting that what you have become within is enough to carry you forward. There are moments in life that look ordinary on the surface, but are sacred in their unfolding. A quiet morning where you finally forgive yourself, a walk alone where you realize you are no longer angry, a decision to no longer argue with what cannot be changed. These are not dramatic moments. They do not trend. They do not need witnesses, and yet they shift the axis of your world. They signal to life itself that you are no longer resisting the current. You are ready to swim, to move, to transform. If you look back at your life, you will see this pattern. The real turning points, the ones that matter, were not marked by external events. They were marked by internal shifts. You decided to change. You decided to let go. You decided to rise. And once you did, the events began to align. Not always instantly, not always smoothly, but with a kind of silent loyalty to the new self you had chosen to embody. Outer change may be delayed. Life sometimes moves slowly, but inner readiness is not bound by that. It happens now in this moment, and the moment you say yes, not with words but with being, the next phase has already begun. Others may not see it. The world may still look the same, but you have shifted, and that shift changes everything. This readiness is a kind of maturity. It is not based on excitement, but on depth. It is not fueled by mood, but by discipline. It is the recognition that waiting for the right time is often a disguise for fear, that postponing your growth in hopes that things will be easier is just another way of staying stuck. It is the understanding that the perfect time never comes, but readiness can arrive in an instant, the moment you choose to trust the self you are becoming. Do not ask the world for signs of approval. Look within. Ask yourself, am I willing to begin without applause? Am I willing to be unseen and unknown while I rise? Am I willing to trust my inner voice over the noise of the world? Because readiness is not about comfort. It is about alignment. It is about choosing to walk forward not because you know what's ahead, but because you are no longer willing to stay where you are. The path ahead is never guaranteed. But the one who is ready within does not require guarantees. They understand that their power lies not in what may come, but in how they meet what comes. They do not shrink in the face of delay. They do not crumble under rejection. They do not need immediate results to validate their process, because they are walking from a different place now, a place of sovereignty, a place of stillness, a place of quiet fire. You do not need to see the full picture to know that you are ready. Readiness is not knowledge, it is surrender. Not passive surrender, but a sacred acceptance that says, I no longer need the world to give me permission. I no longer need things to be easy before I take action. I am ready because I have done the inner work. I am ready because I trust myself to handle what unfolds. I am ready because the fear that once ruled me has become background noise to a deeper voice, a voice that says, begin. The world may still say no, doors may still be closed, people may still doubt you, but if you are ready within, you will not be discouraged, you will knock again, you will build your own door, you will sit quietly until the next step becomes clear. Because now your movement is no longer reactive, it is intentional. It is not based on conditions. It is based on conviction. And that is the difference between drifting through life and walking it with purpose. To be ready within is to live in alignment with your deepest truths. to know what you value and to act in accordance with it even when it's difficult, to carry peace within even when the world is uncertain, to no longer wait for the world to change before you do. And this is where freedom lives, not in controlling what happens, but in choosing how you meet it, not in having perfect plans, but in having an unshakable presence. The new phase begins here, not in the future, but in this breath, in this thought, in this quiet willingness to move. The conditions may not be perfect, but you are not waiting on conditions. You are responding to the call that has risen within you. The old skin is too tight, the old life too small, and though you may not see clearly where the next road leads, you know one thing with certainty: you are no longer the person who waits. You are the one who begins. So now breathe, not because everything is perfect, but because you are present. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You endured, quietly, fiercely, without needing to be seen. And in that endurance, something ancient within you awakened. Not broken, not bitter, but wiser, still ready. The pain did not pass because the world grew kinder. It passed because you grew stronger, you stopped waiting, you stopped wishing, and instead you became. This is where the new begins, not with fanfare, not with certainty, but with the quiet decision to walk forward in alignment with who you are becoming. A new chapter is not written in the sky. It begins when the soul whispers, now, and you listen. So do not look around for signs. You are the sign, not because the world says so, but because something unshakable within you knows. You've passed the hardest time. Everything changes now, because you have. Walk on!